So apparently I'm actually doing the podcast again. It's been 3 weeks, I think, since I released episode 25, which was the first episode after a very long hiatus of, I think, 3 years. I was very happy to have comments from a few of you on the episode. It's brought back a sense of community in knitting, which I think, lost somewhat on Instagram. I think the algorithm and the way people are using Instagram has changed a lot in the last few years. And so I feel, and I'm saying this both as someone who puts videos on YouTube, but also someone who consumes a lot of YouTube, that is today one of the few platforms where you have actual real communities, at least maybe in the world of craft. So I'm very glad to be back on YouTube. In the comments that some of you left, you asked to see or to meet Churchill, which is my second cat, Gus's roommate, or brother as I like to call him. He is very timid, so I probably won't be able to bring him on camera holding him, but I'll try and include some clips and tell you a bit more about him, maybe in the form of a voiceover. It'll be much more suited to his personality and the way he likes to interact with us humans. You also mentioned that you were interested in other crafts that I did other than knitting and crochet, and so I'll definitely include a little bit of that at the end of the episode. I'll try to keep the episode in very distinct segments, both so that it's organised and I can keep it short, and also so you can skip ahead to the section that you are interested in watching. So without further ado, we'll start with the knitting, I think. Today I have two projects that I want to share with you. The first one you've seen before, it's the pair of mittens that I was working on in last episode, and the second one is a new cast on, which I'll go in more detail in just a minute. So we'll start with the mitten, which was still a whip in last episode, and I'm very happy to announce that I have finished one mitten, and so this is the right hand. I'll put it in front of my face so the camera focuses. Yeah, otherwise it doesn't work. So this is the right hand, and this is the back of the hand, and this is the inside, and you can see there's a little hole there to poke your finger through in case you need to access any touch device. It's something that I've first seen done by Becky of Soprano knits. She did that in her Doris mittens, I think it was, the first time, which is a design of hers that she made in honour of her very best friend, whose name is Doris. So this is the mitten one, and actually here you can see that I was working with two different dye lots, and this is work in double knitting, which means that you're holding two strands of yarn and you are making both sides of the fabric look like right side stockinette, and you can do that with two different colours. I decided to do it with the one same colour. And when you use two different colours, what you will have is the inside or the right side of the piece will be one colour, and the wrong side or the outside, if you're knitting it around, will be the other colour. And you can see here at some point I got confused and I switched my front and back yarn, and so I ended up with a lighter stripe in the middle, and that has to do with the fact that I was working with very different dye lots. Just for reference, I'm using some drops alpaca, which is 100% alpaca yarn in fingering weight, and I started with both balls new, and those are 50 grams. After knitting one full mitten, I still have, I would say, 2/3 or maybe 3/4 of it left, so it doesn't really take that much yarn. The mittens are very, very warm. It's almost uncomfortable for me wearing them, given that today is actually a very sunny day and it's quite warm in the apartment. That means that they will be perfect for winter, and it was exactly the reason why I decided to give a go at double knitting, as it creates a fabric that's extremely warm, a bit like stranded collar work, gives a double thick fabric and makes it warmer. Double knitting is also a technique that allows you to achieve a double thick fabric, which is double the warmth, with the advantage that it is stretchy because it is basically stockinette, so you can see you can stretch it much more than you would if it were stranded colour work. So as I was making this, I was also writing the pattern, and I will at some point release it. It's just I don't really feel like working the second mitten now because it's the beginning of the summer and I don't want to be working with alpaca. But as soon as I start working on the second mitten, I will, well, continue writing the pattern, make sure that what I've written so far makes sense as I use it as a base to work the second one, and I will be at some point releasing it. One thing to note with this pattern, which will be my first pattern writing on in double knitting, I've kept the decreases both at the top of the thumb and also alongside the top of the hand. I've not used traditional double knitting decreases. I've actually used a much simpler method, which I would like to see what it looks like if you use two different colours. So what I might do is I might make the left hand, for the purpose of writing the instructions for the left hand and make sure that it works, using two different colours, just so you will be able to see what the pattern looks like when you decide to use two different colours. And I think it will be quite interesting to see the difference. And so that was my first knitting project for this episode. The second knitting project that I am working on is a new cast on. It's also a in progress design of mine. It's a cardigan that I'm calling the Fran cardigan. I've been watching a lot of the show The Nanny, which is somewhat dated. I mean, a lot of it feels like it's very old. For one thing, it's a sitcom which was actually filmed in studios with an audience. So the laughter it's not pre-recorded laughter, it's actually an actual audience reacting to the scene, which I think is way nicer than pre-recorded laughter. And the dynamic of the show, it's just more comedic, because for instance there are scenes when you can actually tell that the actors are holding on, are holding off their next line because people are still laughing in the audience, and so it really looks more like theatre. And I really enjoy this series for this reason. I'm also very nostalgic because it's a show that I used to watch daily when I was younger with my mom, and it's linked to many good memories. Anyways, I've been watching this show and I've been enjoying Fran's fashion a whole lot, and that's what inspired me to cast on a cropped cardigan, which is what I'm working on. If you're not familiar with the show, The Nanny is the story of a young woman from Queens who loses her job as a bridal saleswoman and her boyfriend in the same day, and she ends up becoming the nanny to rich kids, the kids of a widowed Broadway producer in a nicer borough. I can't really remember whether it's the, I don't know if it's in Manhattan or Brooklyn. Anyway, I think it's Manhattan. I would say it's Manhattan because they're the rich kids. And she dresses in very flashy colours, and I think it's set in the 80s, so that's the fashion that you get. And I think towards the end of the series maybe it's the early 90s. But anyways, the colours of her outfits are very flashy, and she wears cropped jackets which are very colourful. But there's also those cardigans that had prints on them or interesting colourful designs and were in mohair. And I think one of those cardigans inspired me, and I thought, well, this is what I want to make. And it also happens that I was gifted a cardigan for Christmas, which I was actually wearing, I think, in my last episode, which is knitted out of mohair as well. And I've been loving this cardigan, and I've been wanting to buy a few more, which I'm not going to do because it's a Cezanne cardigan, so it's very expensive. But I thought, why not knit one? And it just so happened that I had some lace weight fluffy yarn in my stash that I bought from Aimée, of course, because it appears that I only buy yarn from 2 different stores. I had this Kumo yarn from Madelinetosh, which I bought last fall when they were having a sale, because it's quite expensive. I mean, Madelinetosh is expensive to begin with, but this particular base I think is more expensive than the rest. I think it came out at €30 for 50 grams, which is ridiculous, even though you get 300 meters per skein. And the composition is 74% baby suri and 26% mulberry silk, and so it feels very, very luxurious. And this is the colorway Kitsune, which is a brick color. It shows very red, but it's a bit more orangey and rusty. So I have 3 skeins in that color, and I also have 3 skeins in this light pink as well. And initially I thought I would use each color for to make one garment, and I think I was thinking either a jumper or a cardigan, but I wanted to work with stripes, and so I came up with a few sketches of the cardigan I wanted to make using those colours. And so this was the original sketches that I did for the cardigan. So you can see it's a cropped cardigan. It's got stripes, vertical stripes, and sort of bell-shaped sleeves, which are in fashion at the moment, and I've been enjoying both in sewing and in knitwear, even though I've been sewing more than I've been knitting this past year. And I figured I would work the stripes in brioche because it's an easy way. There are a couple of ways you can do vertical striping in knitting. Well, the first one is knit it the other way around. So instead of knitting top down, knit from left to right, work regular stripes, and you will end up with vertical stripes. I didn't want to work in pieces for this cardigan. I wanted to knit it seamlessly, and so that meant that I would have to go for one of the techniques that allows you to work vertical striping. And I can think of 2. The first one is corrugated ribbing. Actually, I can think of 3. The second one is stranded color work, which would work, and it would technically be corrugated ribbing, except you're working stockinette instead of ribbing. And then you can do some brioche. So basically you've got 2 different categories. The first one is stranded, and the second one is tucked stitches, brioche. Stranded color work does not give you lots of give in the fabric, and usually gives regular sized stitches and a dense fabric, which is not what I was looking for with this design. And I wanted the stripes to be quite big, and so I would have had to do, using that yarn, I would have had to do 3 like stripes, maybe 3 or 4 stitches wide, which if you stack them on top of one another, it's really hard to keep a good tension throughout the piece. And so I figured my best choice would be with brioche, which I think works better with this particular yarn because it's fluffy, and so you want to work it with larger stitches so the fluff has a place to go. And so I made a swatch using both colours, and this is what I ended up with. I tried the increases and decreases just to see how they would work. And well, I'm happy with the brioche. I'm very happy with the fabric. It's very lightweight and it's just very airy and what I like. But because it's fluffy, the colours sort of bleed into one another, and so you don't get that nice crisp definition of the stripes that you could get. And this could be beautiful if the colours had been closer, like if there had been less contrast between the 2 colours. I think the fact that we're blending in would work well. For example, I think this could be very cute with a camel color and then a very light beige, for example. That would work nicely, or with a very dark green, like pine tree green, and then a army green, for example, that would work nicely, I think. But there was just too much contrast, and the stripes not being neat with that contrast, I just don't like. And so I decided I would work the cardigan in just one colour, and maybe later try to make a version with non-fluffy yarn, and then use contrasting colours to make stripes, or find two colours that are closer together and are fluffy in a fluffy yarn, and then make the cardigan out of that. So I cast on, I think, 2 weeks ago, and I actually started one way and then redid it completely. So I've only been working on that particular thing for a week, but this is how much I've got. Of course, it doesn't look like much. What you can see though is that there is some interesting shape happening. I'm trying something, I'm not sure it's going to work, and I don't really want to show the construction just yet because I'm not sure it's going to pan out. But next week or next episode I'll try to have the project on a larger needle so I can show you the full piece. What's worth noting though is that this is obviously worked with a raglan construction, so I've started working on the raglan. I've included some short row shaping so that the back sits higher than the front. So for example, the raglan spines, I don't really know how to call them, but the lines from which the increases are worked, in the front they would start right about here, and that's where my collarbones are. But in the back, of course, you want them to be up here on the muscle. And so that means that you've got probably, you know, 5 centimeters that you want the back to be higher than the front for it to sit nicely. Otherwise, what would happen if you did not include the short rows is that either the back would be lower and you would have a very low neckline if you worked with a larger neckline to begin with, or if you start with a narrow or regular sized neckline, then you would have the front sit on top, or sit lower but then bring and shift the whole garment to the front, and so the back side would sort of gape at the bottom. This is what would happen if you don't if you didn't include short row shaping. And the fabric that I'm knitting is, I'm not sure whether or not you're going to see that in video, but this is stockinette brioche. So it's basically like brioche, but the front is all knit stitches and the back is all purl stitches. And of course, because of the nature of the yarn, it doesn't show very well on camera. It will show better in photos, I think, and it shows better if I put my hand behind it. So this is the fabric. So the good thing with working with lace weight yarn is you actually don't use that much on lace weight yarn on larger needles, is you don't use that much yarn. So I still have that much of the skein just to show you the reference. I mean, this is a full size one next to it, so I've not used that much of it really. So I think I'll probably be able to work the whole cardigan, even with the long and larger sleeves, out of I think 2 skeins, which means that I'll have one more of these to work with another yarn, maybe in a shawl or something else, which is also a great way to use this yarn. I must say though, the fabric is really, really soft, and it is a dream working with it. The only drawback I would say is that I like to knit out and about, and if I knit on the street and there's a bit of wind, the yarn is so light it will just fly away, and I have a really hard time moving it because I'm always fighting with the wind, and so that can mess up the tension. Of course, that's not an issue that many people will have because not everyone likes to knit brioche walking outside, but it's an issue that I've been having with it. Otherwise, it's really lovely to work with. It's even not that much of a pain to rip or knit back. Like I mentioned, I started with a construction and then wasn't really pleased with it, so I had to redo the whole thing, and I've actually ripped back twice, and it really wasn't an issue either time. It worked really great, and the yarn kept its integrity, and I was able to rework with it afterwards. So that's all I had for knitting, and now we're going to move to the crochet section, because as I said in last episode, I've been doing a lot of crochet recently, and that really hasn't stopped. So again, I have two projects that I want to share in crochet. The first one you've seen before, and it's my granny stripe blanket in crochet. There's nothing much new to say about the blanket other than that I've made good progress, and I remembered to put in a progress marker so I can actually show you how much I've worked since last episode. Here it is. You can maybe find the marker. It's here in yellow, and so I've worked probably 15 centimeters since last we spoke, from here to here. And another thing I wanted to share with you just quickly is I've relocated all my minis in a shoebox. Actually happens to fit the palette of this project quite nicely, and the reason I've done that is it allowed me to organize them in a way that made sense for how I was using these different colors. The way I've been going about with the blanket is using 4 clusters of colors. I'm very messy in my flat. I don't like things to be tidy, but I'm also extremely organized in my brain, and it shows. Both of these traits show in my crafts, so I will leave my projects around, just laying around in the apartment everywhere, and it drives my partner crazy. But also I will over process and organize projects and create systems for them and be like completely overkill in the way that I structure my crafts. So this is a good example of it. So I'm using 4 clusters of colors. I have them organized in a 2x2 matrix. Basically you've got light to dark, so that would be this axis, and then you've got bluish to red, and that would be sort of this axis. It doesn't really work because some of them are very big balls, but here for the lighter parts you can see that I've got my sort of neutrals at the top, and then it goes to pinks at the bottom, and here you've got some very blue or even dark green and going into purple, which is more red than what's on top. Of course the reddest colour is this one. Having a box has really helped me organise the colours, and it makes picking out a colour much easier when I'm working on the blanket, because I also put the colours in a not precise but organised fashion in the blanket. So I'm trying to alternate dark and light rows because I really like the checkered effect that you can get. For example, there's a whole section here where you almost have a perfect sequence, and I really like that. So I don't want it to be all over the pattern, but I like it to sort of come and go, and so being able to clearly pick a light or a darker colour is very helpful to achieve that. And the other way I've been organising the colour placement in the blanket is I've got one side that's all about the pinks and the reds, and I have another side, and I'm going to take the other end of the blanket, and you're going to see the difference. It's much more about the greys and the blues, and if I have them next to one another, maybe you can tell the difference. So that those are the 2 ends of the blanket. I'm missing a bit of grey in this palette, to be honest, but I'm going to include it with, I think I've got a few balls of yarns that are tucked away somewhere that are in the right colour scheme, and if I can find them I can add them to this collection and keep working that way. So that was the first project, and the second project is again a blanket as well. My second project is also a blanket. I think at one point I will want to crochet something that's not a blanket, but first I want to figure out a way that I can work yarn that's not painful for my wrist, because if I make clothes in crochet, they're probably going to be summer clothes, and so I'll be working with cotton or linen, which are not stretchy yarns and put more tension on my wrist than actual woolen yarn. And so I first need to find a way that I crochet that will be sustainable with a stiffer yarn before I can dive in with a cotton project. So for now, it's all about blankets. And last time I showed you my swatches for Hexies because I wanted this project to be a modular blanket, and I've actually since then changed gears a little. I am working with a different pattern that I swatched just after recording the episode, probably the night afterwards. And I had this idea of Arab mosaic that I'd seen in the Alhambra in Granada, which is a town in the south of Spain, in Andalusia, where they have this huge castle, the Alhambra, which was built during the Arab conquest of the south of Spain, and has beautiful ornaments. It's very intensely decorated, and there's a lot of absolutely beautiful craftsmanship that's integrated in this castle. You've got sculptures, you've got woodworking, and also beautiful colourful mosaics, and this one in particular has both large squares and small octagons, and I thought this was a pattern that I would want to work with. Actually, I'm taking it the other way around, making the octagons rather large and the squares rather small, which is also a mosaic pattern that you find in a lot of different cultures, but I was inspired by this one in particular. Although you may not find it completely in the design in the end, you will, I think, recognize it in the colors that I choose, and I'm going to show you part of them right now. This is the pattern that I ended up with. So you see I have large octagons and I've got small squares in the middle, but you've got this sort of star shape. This one in particular is the design I'm going with, but in the squares you've got a colourful little star, which is actually like the small octagons that were in the original design. And then the large octagons have a more intricate design here. So I've made different versions. It's basically always the same shape, it's just which parts I've used colours for that change in the 4 large ones. I was just sorting out what looked nice with colour, because I wanted to work with a background colour that would be probably 50% of the entire surface, and then various colours to be the rest of the blanket. And so the design in it has, I think, 5 different rounds that you go around, and you could use a different colour for each of those 5 layers for the octagons, and then the squares have a background colour for the joining and then just a contrasting colour for the inside. But as you can see here, you could have those little dots in one colour, and then I'm calling this round, that's white here, the petals, and then this is the inner rim and this is the outer join. And that's how I've been calling this different parts. But basically this is the plan: make this blanket in DK weight yarn. So this is in fingering weight yarn, and you can see that the octagons are, you know, the size of the palm of my hand. So it's still, I mean, this is decent sized octagons compared to, for example, my HexieLoveActually blanket. The octagons here in fingering weight yarn are actually approximately the same size as the Hexies in DK weight yarn. But as I mentioned in last episode, I wanted to have a module that was larger than the Hexie from this blanket. So it actually turns out really nice, because this grows a lot when you work it in DK weight yarn. I've made a sample, but I'm not going to show you yet because I don't have all the colours, and I want to show you something that showcases the whole palette that I will be using for the blanket. I am, however, going to show you the colours that I do have. I'm still waiting in the mail for 3 additional contrasting colours, but I already had some colours that fit the scheme I wanted in my stash. So I think all of them that I'm going to show you are either Madelinetosh DK or some 100% merino that I dyed myself, and that I got from ChesterWoolCompany, which is a wholesaler of undyed yarn. They're based in the UK, so you probably would only know them if you're in Europe. And even now, after Brexit, I don't think I would buy from them again. I don't know what the taxes are like now, but I'd probably want to find another supplier. Anyways, in my stash, I already had this colour, which I'm calling Plum, but the actual name of the colourway is Phantom. And there's already a lot of cat hair in it, but it's this very deep plum colour, which I used for a cropped, heavily cabled jumper, which I wore at the Edinburgh Yarn Festival in 2017, and I linked the project page down below so you can go and have a look if you want to. Then I had this colour, which I'm calling Jade, but I think the actual colourway is Jasper, which is a lovely green. Then I have this very dark grey, which I'm calling Cartridge because it's the name of the actual colourway. I'm also using as a variant of the background colour this skein, which is Ray, and it was from the Star Wars inspired collection. All of these together look like this. So these are cooled tone but also dual deep rich colours, and I really like. And then I figured I need about 8 skeins of background neutral colour, and I really didn't want to spend hundreds of euros buying this yarn, especially if it was going to be like white or beige. And so I had some DK weight yarn that was undyed in my stash, which at first I thought I was going to be able to use as is undyed, but it'd been sitting in a crate which ended up tainting them. So there'd been some discoloration and parts of them were yellowish. So I don't know if it's the crate that they were in, or I bought them at a time when I was still smoking and it was tobacco. But anyways, I couldn't be using them as is because to be honest, it looked like someone had peed on them. So I was not having that. So I took out my dyes and worked on dyeing a whole lot of them and made them in a very cool silvery white. So the idea was they were a bit yellowish and I wanted them to be on the cooler side to better fit the rest of the palette. And so I worked with very light grey coloration. And I wish I had had some extra yarn to show you the difference, but you'll have to trust me that the yarn would have been a bit more yellow like this one, and maybe if I put the two of them together you can see that the one that's skeined is a bit more yellowish and this one is a bit bluer. But that's basically the dye job that I did. And so I made 7, I think, skeins of just this background colour. And I had an extra, well, I didn't have an extra skein, but I wanted to dye another colour that was more of a contrasting colour. And so I did, I made this copperish caramel colour, which I'm going to show you against the other ones. So this is the 4 colours that I'm working with. And so like I mentioned, I've bought since then 3 more contrasting colours from a shop on Etsy, which I will go into detail in the next episode when I actually have received a yarn and I can speak a bit more about it. But I'm very excited about this project. I cannot wait to get the yarn. It's actually in the mail right now, and I think I'll get it either Monday or Tuesday, and I'll start working on the blanket straight away. And I also have a special project that's sort of a sidekick project to the blanket that I'm working on, and that has to do also with my new job. I mentioned in the last episode that I changed jobs. I used to be a strategy consultant, and now I have done a training in web development, and I started working full-time as a web developer, so developing web apps. And yeah, so there's something in the works that has to do with the blanket and has to do with my new job, and I'll talk about it more in the next episode, probably when I've made more progress on it and I can present it to you somewhat. But I would be very curious to know what you think that project might be. So if you have any idea and if you like leaving a comment to tell me, that would be really fun, I think. Also, I definitely want to release the pattern for the blanket. I've never made a crochet pattern before, but I will have it tech edited anyway, so it is to a high quality standard. I just think I will not wait for the actual first sample to be completely worked, because I want it to be a massive blanket and it's going to take me a really long time to get there. So I think I'll release the pattern, because it's a modular project. I don't really need to have the full-size blanket to release the pattern. I just need to have enough modules made to figure out the amount of yarn that's required for a larger project. So I think I will still be able to release a pattern for that rather quickly, even though this blanket will take me quite a while to complete. So tell me if that's something that you would be interested in having. And so that's all the projects that I had for today. It's not that many projects, but I still think the episode is going to be quite long. Just wanted to show you one more thing, and that is Churchill. A few of you mentioned in the comments or messaged me to ask who was the cat responsible for me saying my cat's in the background with an S plural, because I have 2 cats. If you know me only from YouTube, you've probably only met Gus, but I actually have a second cat. His name is Churchill, and we got him in 2017. Just before I started work full-time, because I didn't want Gus to be alone all day when I was at work, and so we got Churchill then. He is a British short hair that we got from a lovely breeder near Paris. Gus was adopted. They get along very well, so they quickly adapted to one another. We were very lucky in that sense, but they are very different in their personality and attitude and behaviour. Gus likes to lay in the sun, and Churchill likes to sleep in the sink because it's cool there, and he likes to sleep on the bathroom floor because it's tiles, and again it's very cool. He likes to be in the shade. Gus doesn't like human food. Churchill does like human food, and he particularly enjoys olive oil. He's not cuddly at all. Gus is very cuddly, but Churchill is very timid, sort of an introvert, doesn't like being around humans that much. Although I will say that he has been closer to me ever since I've started being at home full-time. So they're very different, but we love them both, and they're both, I think, the most beautiful cats I've ever met, and I am 100% biased, but they've given us a lot of love, and I hope we are giving them all that they need in return. Anyway, so that's it for this episode. It's all I wanted to share with you. Tell me what you thought of this episode, if you want to see more, what you would want to see in the next episode. Also remember, if you have an idea what my special project relating to the crochet blanket is, you can leave your guess in the comments below. I hope you have a really nice week, and I will see you soon.